Okay, now let's turn to Gaza. How can this upcoming election change the situation, the disastrous, tragic situation in Gaza?
The upcoming election will have no effect on the war in Gaza. The United States will support Israel unconditionally, whether Kamala Harris is in the White House, Joe Biden is in the White House, or Donald Trump is in the White House. In the United States, we have this powerful lobby. It's called the Israel Lobby. It has awesome power over policymakers, especially when it comes to making policy with regard to Israel. And no matter what Israel does in Gaza, or no matter what Israel does to the Palestinians, the United States will support it unconditionally. And there is nothing Kamala Harris has said or done to lead one to think that she will change our policy toward Israel and toward the Middle East in any meaningful way. And of course, Trump has made it clear that he's going to continue to support Israel no matter what. So regardless of what happens in November in the presidential election, and even in the congressional elections, U.S. policy toward Israel and towards Gaza is not going to change.
You just talk about Israel lobby, and we know that you publish a well-known book also titled Israel Lobby several years ago. So are they as influential as before, or they're getting more influential to the U.S. politics?
I think the lobby is more influential in terms of its dealings with policymakers and politicians today than it was in 2006 when Steve Walton and I wrote the article, and 2007 when we wrote the book. It's more powerful in terms of its dealing with policymakers, politicians. To put it more generally, the lobby is more powerful at the elite level. At the public level, it's less influential today than it was when we wrote the article in the book. And there is much less enthusiastic support toward Israel and much more enthusiastic support of the Palestinians in the public today than there was back then. So what you have today is something of a disjuncture between the public and the elites on the subject of Israel. And you see this, by the way, reflected in the Democratic National Convention, right? The leaders of the Democratic Party made sure that no person who was sympathetic to the Palestinians, be that person a Palestinian, an Arab American, or just a progressive Democrat, that no person of that sort would be able to speak at the convention, right? Nevertheless, if you looked at what happened at the convention, if you looked at who was there, there were a huge number of people, mainly outside the convention, although some were inside the convention, who were deeply committed to supporting the Palestinians and badly wanted someone to get up before the convention and speak on behalf of the Palestinians, to criticize what was going on or what is going on in Gaza. But the Democratic Party elites would not allow that to happen. So what you see here is evidence of that disjuncture between what's happening at the elite level, where policymakers and politicians remain firmly committed to Israel because the Israel lobby gives them no choice. Whereas down here in the body politic, the tides are shifting, and there is much more criticism of Israel today than there was in the past.
So we're actually just out of DNC, and we saw what happened. The situation, we see a lot of base that are not satisfied with the Democratic Party's policy towards Gaza or Palestine. And some people are saying this Democratic Party are actually shooting themselves in their feet by supporting Israel because they will lose a lot of votes. And the idea is that people do have vote. If they see things they don't like, they can put the pressure on the Democratic Party's nominee, who is Kamala Harris. So what happened right now?
2 points. One is people do have the right to vote, but the question is, do they have a meaningful choice here between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris when it comes to Israel and the genocide in Gaza? And the answer is they have no meaningful choice because there's no difference between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris on how the United States should deal with Israel. There's just no meaningful difference. So your vote really doesn't matter. My second point has to do with what you say about the Democratic Party. There is no question that the Democratic Party has a real problem. It has a large progressive wing that's filled with people who are super critical of Israel, who are well aware that a genocide is taking place and want a fundamental change at the top in the Democratic Party. At the same time, there are a large number of American Jews who are deeply committed to the Democratic Party, who want the Democrats to continue to support Israel unconditionally. The problem that Kamala Harris faces, and it's a problem that Joe Biden would have faced were he running, indeed it's a problem that any Democratic policymaker would face if he or she were running for president on the Democratic ticket, is that if you move to accommodate or to appease or to support the pro-Palestinian faction, you alienate those American Jews who are deeply committed to Israel. And if, on the other hand, you try to reassure American Jews who are in the Democratic Party that you will support Israel in the future, much the way you have in the past, you alienate basically the progressive wing of the party. And given that almost everybody expects the election between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump to be very close, every vote matters. Right. And here you have a situation where Kamala Harris is in a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation. Mm-hmm. And it could be the case, we don't know for sure how this will play itself out, but it could be the case that she will lose, and she will lose in large part because she has sided with the pro-Israel forces inside of the Democratic Party against the progressive wing or the pro-Palestinian side.
So when we talk about, you say Israel lobby is getting more influential right now. In the case of war in Gaza, how do they influence the U.S. politics this time? Why almost every politicians in the United States are just follow what they want?
Well, virtually every politician on Capitol Hill knows full well that the lobby will monitor carefully what their position is on Israel. And if they support Israel no matter what, they give Israel unequivocal support, and they need campaign contributions, the lobby will make sure that campaign contributions are funneled to them. If, on the other hand, they favor a policy that's critical of Israel or limits what Israel can do, let's say in Gaza, the lobby will put its gun sights on those politicians and go to great lengths to make sure they are defeated in the next election. So every politician on Capitol Hill understands full well that he or she has a deep-seated interest in supporting Israel no matter what, for purposes of his or her political survival. So that's very important. And then when you have individuals who run for president, those candidates, whether it's Kamala Harris, Donald Trump, Joe Biden, they all understand full well that in the campaign, they have to say unequivocally that they support Israel, that they have a profound commitment to the Jewish state. And once they're in office, if they begin to veer away from the policy line that the lobby faces, the lobby will put enormous pressure on them to get back in line and to become pro-Israel in the extreme once again. And the lobby has a very sophisticated playbook. This is a truly impressive operation. I mean, the institutions and the individuals who make up the lobby wield tremendous power, and they do it in very effective ways. So we can expect, Kamala Harris or Donald Trump not to veer far from the policy line that Joe Biden has taken since he moved into the White House, and certainly since October 7th.